3 years ago, I landed a UX job at Zalando. I went through the classical 3-stage interview process: portfolio deep dive, whiteboard challenge, and culture fit. And it's the second video in this sequence explaining how I did that. If you've missed the first video about the screening interview and the portfolio deep dive, I recommend you to watch it now to get the full picture. My name is Ines, my channel is about UX design. Let's go! This video is about the whiteboard challenge interview. And as I said in the previous video, all my interviews for this specific hiring process was done in one day. And after my portfolio deep dive session, I had around 30 or 40 minutes to chill and prepare to the next interview, which was the whiteboard challenge. I was so nervous before the whiteboard challenge, you cannot imagine that. Because as you probably remember from my previous video, my English was not so good at that time. I only had the B2 level, which means that I could not express myself freely on a topic. And the whiteboard challenge is all about expressing freely and spontaneously, and that was a nightmare for me. Also, at that time, I was trying hard to find the information about how people passes the whiteboard challenge, and I could not find any reliable information or courses or videos with mock interviews that could help me understand this, because in my native country it's more typical when a designer is assigned a take-home design challenge, and whiteboard challenges I had a very vague idea of what to expect there. And the most thing that was bothering me is that I could not understand what level of detail should I go while solving the whiteboard challenge. And also it was told me that the whole challenge takes around 90 minutes. So those 30-40 minutes between the interviews I spent really trying to calm myself down. And I kinda did it because my first interview, the portfolio deep dive, went really well in my opinion. But I also could rehearse this, I could prepare the story, I could prepare all the materials, I was owning the stage. So with this mood and underlying nervousness, I entered the second interview, the whiteboard challenge. The guy that was interviewing me at that time has become my lead after I joined Zalando. I did not know that's gonna happen at that time, of course, but we kinda get along really well and really fast. So before we dive into how exactly I did it, I need to give you a disclaimer. Unfortunately, I cannot reveal you the exact challenges that I had during my interview process, because we try to keep it confident so we don't have to invent whiteboard challenges every year. And since I joined Zalando, the whiteboard challenges we had did not change, and that's why it's forbidden for me to tell you the exact details of the challenge. But I have prepared the examples for you that would give you the same idea of what I went through at that time. So I had to go through 2 challenges. I was told about that right in the beginning. My interviewer first spent some time to explain me how it's gonna work and to make a report and to calm me down. And now also when I'm interviewing at this particular stage, I try to do the same. I try to explain everything in detail and to make people relaxed, because it's important that an interviewer approaches the design challenge from a point of curiosity, from a point of a friendly conversation with your fellow designer. And I'm really grateful for my lead at that time, who was making an interview with me, that he kinda did it. So even in this 5 minutes of the introductions and discussion that we had in the beginning, I felt that I am with a friend. But of course, in the reality, it is not happens all the time. Sometimes you just don't get along with a person. Sometimes they are just too nervous. But if you are approaching this challenge yourself, my best advice is to try to find this point of playfulness and curiosity. It's great when your interviewer is creating the atmosphere from the very beginning, when you can naturally gravitate to this feeling. But even if not, this is the mindset I recommend you to adopt. I will read you now the design challenge that approximately resembles the design challenge that I had before. Also, my interviewer read it out for me, and he actually did it twice to make sure I understand everything. Now, the challenge. Let's imagine Zalando developed a virtual fitting room, allowing users to try things on a video of themselves. The goal is to reduce returns by 5%. Users need to film a video of themselves following recommendations, and then they can try on any clothes without redoing videos that often. It's a hot feature, and code-wise it is ready. Now we need a UI for it. First, how would you do the virtual fitting room discoverable? I was also explained that I am allowed to open any source that I wish and to share my screen. This is exactly what I did. I opened Zalando website, shared my screen, and started thinking out loud. Of course, I have studied Zalando website really thoroughly before this interview. And this is my best advice ever for you. Because you can never prepare to the whiteboard challenge. You don't know what is coming. But I can almost guarantee you, you will be talking about the exact product where you are applying to. So knowing it ins and out will really help you to first be comfortable, second to make a good impression on the interviewer. So I clearly demonstrated from the first seconds that I know Zalando's website really well, although at that time I was not a Zalando customer. I also asked for some time of silent thinking because I needed again to calm myself down and to gather some initial ideas. And this is also the good strategy. And when I'm interviewing myself right now, I even let people to take this couple minutes of silence to get the thoughts together. Because it does not look good when a designer rushes to the answer. They might be too nervous and that makes the answer unstructured. Then, when I spent those couple of minutes, I had a couple of ideas already. My goal was to make the virtual fitting room discoverable. So I started thinking out loud, where could it potentially go at Zalando's navigation? Because this is the mock challenge that I'm giving you right now, I will give you the approximate ideas that you might have. You might want to place the virtual fitting room inside of the product page. Say when I'm discovering a trousers and want to choose the size, I can right there see the video of myself and record this. Another idea that you can potentially have is to place the virtual fitting room inside of the user's profile. The logic for that is that I will record the video of myself once and it will be stored in my profile and I can always change it there. And then I will have a lightweighted version on the product page. And those are the ideas we basically discussed. So what are the pros and cons of these approaches? How can we scale this? Those types of questions. I was also sketching a lot and making sure this is visible, because I believe that this is way more easy for interviewer to see my ideas and to understand them when I'm also drawing them. At that time, I was sketching on the piece of paper and just showing it through the webcam. Now I know better strategies when I have become an interviewer myself. I see that many people discuss information architecture, building mind maps. You can use any tooling, including FigJam, to just draw some mind maps. And another idea I have seen is when you have an iPad, you can share the screen of your iPad there and just sketch it in front of me. So those are the most successful strategies. It does not really matter what would you choose. Just make sure you make your conversation visible. Just make sure you make your conversation as visual as possible. Classical pen and paper is always the option, but think about that upfront. Now, after we have discussed those initial ideas, I received a follow-up question. Let's say you have 4 weeks for that and 2 designers in your team. How would you organize their time? I must say to you that this is a question for seniors plus. And because I was applying to the principal role, I have received this. And the first thing I did that I have challenged the 4 weeks timeline. And actually, from my own experience as an interviewer, I can tell to you that many people, they just take this timeline without challenging that. And the timeline is really unrealistic. It is set so to sound unrealistic. But people that are coming from agencies or from freelancing, they often don't have this luxury to challenge the timelines. They just do the work in any timeline given. This is not how we work at tech companies. You are the equal counterpart to other team members. And if you, from your expertise, could already see that we cannot meet this timeline at the quality that we want to maintain, you should challenge that. And this was exactly what I did, and now I know this was the right answer. I was asked, okay, what would you propose and do then? And my answer was, well, I would speak to PM and ask to either scope down the feature or to negotiate the deadline. I also provided some argumentation why I don't think the 4 weeks timeline is not possible. And one of the reasonings that I had is, well, Zalando is a big organization. We also have to ensure we plan for internal communication. We plan to update supporting materials on our FAQs. We also need to ensure we align with all the stakeholders. So I could kind of foresee the potential challenges I could face inside of Zalando that might not be applicable for a startup, for example. That's why it's really important to do preliminary research about the company, to know at least the size of the team and estimate the approximate complexity of the processes that they have there. Now, we were done with the first challenge, we were done in about 40-45 minutes, and we have proceeded to the second challenge. And I will read it for you out loud again. And again, this is not the exact challenge I received, but the closest version to it. Let's imagine we decided to add a virtual fitting room to the product page, but the video upload and management will be done on a separate page under the profile. Design this separate page using any tool you like. So I opened Figma right away, just because I heard the phrase design the separate page. But now I know that the expectation is that you don't design the page in the given 45 minutes. You just need to continue the conversation about how would you approach the design of this page, what principles would you set to it, and you can basically continue with the pen and paper. But I also opened Figma because I don't really use pen and paper, and it was kind of natural for me. I started by listing features out of my head that could go to this page. Then when I ran out of ideas, I told the interviewer that I would go and explore other virtual fitting rooms that exist, but during the interview process it was of course not possible. That's why it was just a check mark. Yeah, I know how to scope the feature. I also said that in order to find the visual inspiration, I would also go to Dribbble and I would study Zalando's own website to land on a style that would fit to this page. But I also did the note that of course supposedly when I work at Zalando I already know the style and I don't need to remind myself about it every time. And then I just started low fidelity wireframing. Say on the left I will be having the list of menu, on the top I will have a headline, and I basically drew everything in the gray boxes. I was asked why have I started with the web. I told the interviewer that I started with web because we are using the web screen here and it's just easier for me to make a screenshot and to reference to the pages that I have open there. But I'd say the best way to do this was to start thinking about that upfront before I start designing. And probably if I would give myself those couple of minutes to think, which I did not take this time, I would decide to start with a mobile, because I would assume that more users shop on mobile and there we also have more constraints. But I started in the way I started and we proceed. So I sketched some preliminary ideas how the page might look and said that now I would need more time to add details to it, but we don't have this time on the interview. I was then asked the follow-up question. Let's imagine I'm a junior UX designer now, and you give me some mentoring on how to design this virtual fitting room. How would you do this? And this is the question for Seniors Plus. Again, as in the first challenge, because I was applying to a principal role, I have received this question. You might receive a different question, but definitely some follow-up questions are to be expected. And the way to answer this from Seniors Plus perspective was to start thinking about some principles and guidelines. I first explained one more time the process, how I would approach it. I would probably go to other websites and screenshot all the virtual fitting rooms I could find. Then I would make sure I am familiar once again with Zalando's visual style and guidelines and design systems. And then I started thinking about some guidelines. It could be accessibility, for example. How can we make sure that a person who is not familiar with creating videos could create it as well? Or how could a person with some disabilities do this as well? And then I basically brainstormed other guidelines like that. You might not receive this question because you might be just applying it to a junior design role, but the general recommendation here is to be visual when you are talking. Still, sketch as much as possible. Make sure it is visible that you are taking notes, because it's just easier to follow your line of thought when we can also see something on the screen. And give yourself some time to think through your answers. Really, the worst answers I gave on this interview was when I did not think it through, like with an example of why have I started with the web. As an interviewer, I cannot emphasize this enough, because I can clearly see when a person don't give themselves this time to think, and then the answer that they have is usually not well thought through. And as interviewers, we are not trying to trick you. Yes, we can ask a tricky question about the 4 weeks timeline, for example, but we're not testing your UX knowledge. It is not an exam, we just want to know how you think. and if you can explain and present your ideas in a structured way, of course. I hope this video was useful for you, and now you know how the whiteboard challenge is organized and what possible strategies could you have when preparing to it. Make sure you structure your answer, make sure you know what you are going to talk next. And it's completely fine to take 1-2 minutes to think in silence. And then be visual. Think upfront, how would you do sketches? Would you prefer a pen and paper, or would you open a sketching tool on your iPad and share the screen? But just think it upfront and try to be calm and speak from this place of playfulness and curiosity when you will be solving this challenge. The best way you can do this is to imagine that your interviewer is just your colleague and a counterpart, and you are just bouncing ideas to see how you can solve the challenge that is in front of you. And remember, there is no expectation you will solve the challenge through and through during the 90 minutes, 60 minutes that you've given. You just need to demonstrate what questions would you ask, how would you approach the task, and what tools would you naturally use. In the next video, I will walk you through the last step in my hiring process, which in some cases called culture fit, in some cases job-specific interview, and we are going to talk about how would I approach this now and what did I do 3 years ago to pass it. Thank you for watching, and if you don't want to miss this video, hit the subscribe button down below. I see you next time.